This is the vlog for October 3rd, and have you ever bought a shirt and then left it hanging on the wall for, not the wall, the hook, the hanging on the rack, the hanger? We just left it hanging for 2 months. That's what happened to me. I actually bought this shirt, I'll show it off again, right before I went to my cousin's wedding, and just forgot that I had it and never wore it. So I wore it today for the first time. And it's an interesting shirt for a couple of reasons. First of all, this is Super Mario Kart, which was a Super Nintendo game. Came out probably 93, 94 maybe. And I believe, I could be wrong, but I believe almost all the characters, in fact, I think all the characters in the game that you could play as are on this shirt. Notice anything interesting? So you've got Mario and Luigi, obviously. You've got Peach and Toad off in the corner, as he is often wont to do. Yoshi is there. Yoshi was a big deal on the Super Nintendo because he was one of the first new characters in Mario for a long time. Bowser and one of his Koopalings are also on the shirt. But who's that in this corner up here? It's not Donkey Kong, or is it? This is actually Donkey Kong Jr. because in that particular game, Donkey Kong was not a playable character. Donkey Kong's first appearance as a playable character in a Mario Kart game was Mario 64. And that's very interesting. So, Donkey Kong Jr. had his own game, which was a sequel to Donkey Kong. Came out in the 80s. It was an arcade game, but I think it was eventually brought over to the Nintendo. And he didn't have a lot of appearances. I think he was, as an Easter egg, I think one of the kings in Super Mario All-Stars, Super Mario 3, just in the Super Nintendo All-Stars game, was turned into Donkey Kong Jr. until you rescued him and returned his magic wand, which allowed him to assume his real form. So it wasn't really Donkey Kong Jr., it was just somebody turned into Donkey Kong Jr. He had his own math games that weren't very good. And he just sort of disappeared right around the time Donkey Kong Country came out. And this is interesting because Rare, who developed the developer who made Donkey Kong Country, had sort of internally decided that their character, DK, as he is almost universally referred to, was not in fact the original Donkey Kong, who was sort of assumed to be Donkey Kong from the 1980s arcade game. Just very old now that it was 20 years past. At that point, it was probably only about 10 years past, come to think of it. But they like the idea that Cranky Kong was actually the original Donkey Kong and had been, stealing ladies and storing them on skyscrapers for however long. And that would mean that Donkey Kong Jr. was theoretically Cranky Kong's son, and DK was his grandson. But given that that means Donkey Kong Jr. has basically disappeared for a very long time, it does make a lot more sense to suggest that while Cranky is grandfather aged, he's actually DK's father, which makes DK Donkey Kong Jr. Which sort of explains why he likes going by DK instead of Junior, because, who would really want to go by Junior all the time? So, as it stands, I could be wrong about this, but I believe that chronologically, Super Mario Kart was the last appearance of Donkey Kong Jr., and Donkey Kong Country came out just like a year or two after that, and thus that Donkey Kong Jr. became DK, who has gone on to be in all these different games, and been a rival to Mario, sometimes a villain, sometimes a hero in his own right. I'm a big fan of the Donkey Kong Country Returns game on the Wii. It is a really cool game. It was a lot of fun. I really love the level design. I love the artistic style. That was Retro, not Rare, that put that together. And hats off to them. Really do think it's a fantastic game. So, there you have it. Some interesting and somewhat ancient Nintendo Apocrypha. That's a fun word, isn't it? Apocrypha. It's basically obtuse information that doesn't have a terrible large amount of relevance to modern anything, which I think this fits. But yeah, it's it's one of the few times where it's sort of logically falls into place. There have been an awful lot of times when the original creators have come out and announced that something is actually a certain way, and the fan understanding has been wrong for a long time. And the fans just sort of go, yeah, sure. But I think this was one of the few times where it sort of gelled and sort of made sense. Um, so, I've got a lot of stuff to do tonight, so I'm going to keep this one short, just talking about some DK. But anyways, I'm Eric Spornitz, and tomorrow will be better.